All right, so YCS Houston just concluded, and I can honestly say it did not disappoint. There was the customary fire alarm emergency, an incredible cosplaying Labyrinth player who went undefeated in Swiss, underdog deck making a whole lot of appearances on stream, and a ban list being announced.
They're watching me. I need to tell you that.
So this was definitely an incredible event, and me and my two little buddies over here are going to make sure you are up to date with everything that took place. So continue watching, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like as well. So starting with the top cut breakdown. Top 32 consisted of Raizu, which is 12 spots of the top 32, 11 Malice, and then 2 offs and 1 offs of quite a lot of decks. And the deck diversity is something that was seen quite a lot on stream. However, as you can see, there was not a lot of actual conversion rate for most of these decks. So what does that really say about them? We're obviously going to discuss. So Raizu and Malice comprising most of this pie chart is definitely not a surprise. They are clear best decks of the format. And people also play different versions. We have 7 Fiendsmith and 5 Pure, and the ratio of different Malice versions is 9 Pure to 2 Fiendsmith, which this is the only surprising thing to me because I felt like more people were on the Fiendsmith Malice pipe train, kind of. But apparently not. Or there were, but there was not enough conversion rate. So let's consider this. I have been saying for some time that Malice feels like it's better pure just because of the sheer amount of non-engine that you can play. But obviously, Fiendsmith gets you out of those sticky situations when you get Lancet or you just have 2 random bodies lying around, which for some reason happens quite a lot. Like you get interrupted, and if you had a way to put an additional body on the field, you could just go Moon into Requiem into Fiendsmith combos. So it's a double-edged sword, I would say, when you're playing Malice. I guess just don't play it and don't bother. You can choose any of the other decks that made top cut, and among those are some surprising choices. So the first one is Blue Eyes. This one is not as surprising. The only surprising thing about Blue Eyes, and also I said surprising too many times in this video, so I have got to contain myself. The only interesting thing about Blue Eyes is that there are many different versions being played, but I still believe Primite is the clear best version. We did, however, see a Blue Eyes Odeon deck, which the player said in their post-match interview, which they did win on the feature match. The success of this deck could be divided into both archetypes having really good synergy and also the surprise factor. Moving on, we have 1 Mermail, which this came as quite shocking, seeing as how Mermail had a lot of successes lately, but the conversion rate is kind of poor. Like, it had the same conversion rate as Rescue Ace. And that is not to say that Rescue Ace is on the level of Mermail. I am sorry to break it to you. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think Mermail is a great contender for this format, so it was surprising to me. However, I would say that it's also on more people's radar, meaning that they're more prepared for it. They play specific hand traps to counter it, and a lot of hand traps overall, because that's just what you gotta do when you're up against a combo deck. You know, cross your fingers and pray that you draw 2 or 3 hand traps. Then we have Yubao, which we witnessed a very cool Yubao mirror match on stream. I thoroughly enjoyed it because the Yubao opponent went second into his Yubao's opponent's board. So that was cool to see. But yeah, I think Yubao is kind of an underdog of the format. It's not a bad combo deck. It's just that, I mean, I have been saying this for quite a while, so you already know how I feel about Yubao. I just feel like the grind game is not really incredible. You're kind of losing to Bishios, and I'll not spend too much time talking about it. It's cool to see it top. I still am convinced it's not the greatest deck. However, you do sometimes have a lucky event and you pick a good deck. And I think that was also the case with the Rescue Ace player, which I already mentioned, because he played really well. If you watched the stream, you could tell that he was a good player. And if you pair that together with just having an extensive knowledge of the deck itself that you are playing, and Rescue Ace being an okay deck once it gets going. It makes sense that they topped. It's just that Rescue Ace has too many issues with consistency. And I also think it's kind of weird to go up against Detonator. There is also White Forest, which is like, it's just always there. You can always expect at least one top from this deck because it's still a combo deck. And when combo decks go first, and it's kind of tough to interrupt this particular one, you're just going to win. And I know it's not just dice roll dependent, but it does matter. And I'm purposely leaving Labyrinth for last, just in case you're wondering, because we have got to have a discussion about that. So the Odeon deck is super surprising to me because we witnessed so many Odeon decks, and I refuse to call it Tomb Keeper. It's just, I don't know, I can't really. But there was a whole lot of versions on stream. People played it with pretty much everything. And it's a super cool deck, but the conversion rate was also super low. So let's think about that. I think this deck should not be viewed as your run-of-the-mill trap deck, meaning that it's also going to lose to a lot of non-engine that beats the meta decks. And that's why I think the conversion rate was low. Now let's talk about Labyrinth, because this is just so impressive. I cannot even begin to tell you how excited I am about this, because Labyrinth always felt like a super fair deck. It didn't just feel that way. I genuinely believe Labyrinth is super, super fair. And it's nice to see it be a good meta call. But you gotta keep something in mind. In a post-match interview, this player said, you can beat Malice after he successfully beat Malice. You can't beat Malice, you just gotta know their lines, know when to interrupt them. And it seems so obvious, right? But when you're playing a control deck, especially a control deck like Labyrinth, you have got to be able to play the other best decks in the meta as well or even better than your own deck, because you gotta know what your opponent is thinking and what they're planning to do. And being able to master a deck like Malice and then choose a deck that doesn't necessarily have a great matchup into Malice, but still be able to do well into it because you're familiar with the deck enough, like that's just, it is very impressive. So that's what I gotta say about this chart. And as we're moving on to top 16, top 8, and so on, you can see that for the most part, we are still looking at Raizio and Malice variants. There's like a pure Raizio in Top Cut for sure, right? Because it's still a good choice. And I know I didn't spend too much time talking about those decks, but by now, I think it's very obvious why they are the top decks of the format. And as for some of these other ones, it's just nice to see for them to go as far as they did, because Top Cut is vastly different from Swiss, so you have got to keep that in mind as well. Now let's talk about the two eventual finalists, which were Raizio and Goblin Memento, who actually won the entire event, which is such an incredible accomplishment. This particular version with goblins is a great choice because it helps you play under Shifter, and it also helps you deal with the Raizio matchup, which obviously went really well for this player. This deck is definitely not a deck to sleep on. I think players just don't gravitate towards it as much because it is a tough combo deck to pilot, and there are also others out there, so they might just use those. But that's not to say that this deck is not a good contender right now. Now let's talk about some other things that happened. I want to draw your attention to this clip.
You have 3 sleeves that are really noticeable.
Now, to just quickly go over this, I figured I would cover it in the video because I think it's important to talk about this as just a topic overall. Sharking, right? There is a huge difference in sharking or simply enforcing rules that have got to be enforced, or straight up just notifying your opponent that you notice something about their deck that's sus. Like, you have every right to do so. And for everyone attacking the opponent, calling out the 3 weird cards, which, by the way, as per a reply, ended up being the 3 cards shuffled in for the fusion summon of Desiree. So nothing sus about that. But as per this player, they looked weird. So just call your opponent out, call a judge. That's why they are there, to assess these types of situations and investigate further and figure out if you had malicious intent or they had malicious intent or neither of them did. And also something to note per replies, again, the player that called out the cards is a respectable judge in the community. So he was definitely not being malicious. He knows what's up with the rules, and he just wanted to call something out that seemed suspicious to him. And that's perfectly fine. So let's not attack our fellow duelists and immediately go, sharking, they're sharking. Oh my God, they're sharks. Like, it's so cringe. Like, just know the difference, because when you actually encounter sharking, it's going to matter that you're aware of the differences. Now let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about something that's also interesting, is number 103 Ragna 0. Now this is a new tech in the Raizio deck, and I wanted to mention it to you in case you haven't noticed on stream. I think it's a great addition. So if you're playing Raizio, consider playing this card as well. Since we're on the topic of tech cards, a couple things to note would be that we have seen an array of hand traps, but it was the most usual ones. I don't think there was anything super out of the ordinary when it comes to tech cards for this event. I would say mostly the decks are what's different about this format, because ODN kind of came out of nowhere. Blue Eyes is still trying to find its own with different versions. Malice as well is still testing out the waters to see what loses to Lancia less. And yeah, I think all in all, no matter the tech cards, no matter the decks, we have a new ban list. So we are going to completely have to shift our focus to trying to make our decks as best as possible for Nats season and for this new and hopefully improved format as well. So with that, thank you so much for watching today's video. Hope you enjoy my reports. I do pour a lot of love and hard work into those. So please make sure to give it a like if you liked it. And with that, have a great rest of your day or night. For me, it's the middle of the night like it usually is for US YCSs. So we are going to go sleep. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye-bye.